pleased to be here. We're trying out Veronica's new studio, and it seems to be working well, so it's been quite good fun. So what I have in my talk really is a bit about what I'm doing, what I've been doing this year, and how I suppose it might actually fit in with the general project that Veronica's running. I should say that since COVID struck in March 2020 with us, really, we were all locked down from that point. I haven't really made any work since then. So really, I've had almost like 2 years not making any prints at all. So actually, one of the things I'm using this project to do, even just from my own selfish point of view, is to actually ease myself back into printmaking. And part of the reason for not doing any work for the last 2 years is basically just because we've had to deal with all the complications and the difficulties of trying to cope with COVID and teaching and things like that. So what I've got is I've got a few slides of previous work, and then some slides of what I've been doing really since January this year. And I was thinking about landscape, and I was thinking about my sort of reaction to it. And I've always had sort of elements of a landscape in my work, but really I'm more a sort of an objects person. I'm more interested in still life. And that's partly because of my family background, because my father's a painter, and he would set up still lives in his studio. So that's really where that interest comes from. But in terms of collecting, I sort of feel myself as a bit of a collector. I do collect fossils, or I did collect fossils. I collect various bits and pieces. I've got displays of sort of knickknacks that I pick up on the beach and that sort of thing. But as well as that, I'm also collecting photographs a lot of the time. So I'm photographing things, and I've got sort of files and files and files of photographs on computers and on floppy disks or whatever disks they are. Which are all sort of kind of used to some extent in my work. So I've just got some slides here of this is fossils at Lyme Regis Museums in the south of England. You might have come across it. But I'm also interested in, as I say, collecting things that I see. So this is just a series of little thumbnail photographs that have been taken around Aberystwyth Harbour, where I live sort of just down by the marina. So it's quite easy for me to then walk over to the harbour. And so I collect sort of photographs of usually sort of quite ambiguous, sort of not quite sure what they are sort of things, like sort of bits of paint on walls, looking through windows, lots of sort of flotsam and jetsam, things that you see on fishing boats, and sections of sort of rusting bits and pieces. That's all quite exciting for me down on the harbour. And there's some more examples. And I also I've got these old type drawers that you'd have sort of lead type in it. So I kind of use them to sort of display them and sort of put things that I find. So I kind of collect things like badges and stones and shells and all that stuff. And somehow all that material then eventually, well, not all of it, but quite a lot of it finds its way into my prints and drawings. Oh, I'm there. And that interest in still life and using found objects goes right back to my student days. So this particular etching, for instance, is called the Style Still Life. And the reason why it's called the Style Still Life is that it was entered into a competition run by Stoll's Wine Company. So that's why it kind of won a prize. So that's really why it was called. But for me at the time, it was kind of like a landmark print that I did. This is really when I was sort of like about 20 years old, I suppose, or 19 or something like that, really quite young. And these are various objects that I found in an old industrial site. And I really kind of was quite attracted to them, partly because of the sharpness of these kind of bits of girder, I think they were, and then these sort of black bullet-like kind of materials as well. And I realized that what I quite like about the sort of ambiguity of these objects is that they become almost like a language. And that's something else that, we're trying to deal with in this project. I think to a certain extent, we're thinking about language and the landscape. So quite a lot of the work really since then, over time, has involved looking at kind of a personal language, if you like. So it's been developed from these kind of objects that I find and other sort of such examples. I'm not quite sure why it's jumping. These are a bit later. These are 1999. So these were done in Belfast. These were done as collages. So I quite like the idea of collage and assemblage and sort of bringing these sort of quite disparate objects together in different ways, or actually using fine materials and seeing what they come up with. And I also quite like sort of writing and notes and sort of shopping lists and things like that. So they all kind of went into that. And if you know my sort of book on lithography, that drawing on the right is the sort of the basis for that one. And in terms of landscape, I picked out this project, which actually I'd forgotten about, but this was again when I was still teaching in Belfast. So this was a project about a place called Navan Fort, which is sort of near the city of Armagh, sort of southwest of Belfast. And Navan was the ancient capital of Ulster, and it's quite an interesting archaeological site. I was very much drawn by the objects in the museum that they dug up there. So they dug up these gold horns or ceremonial horns, and then there's lots of other items they found. And then just looking at the archaeological drawings and the sort of the site maps of this rather large sort of rampart fort, which had a sort of big sort of ditch around it. So it's really quite a large shape. So it's this kind of circular shape. So in this particular project about sort of that kind of landscape, it was then sort of making series of little drawings and sketchbooks and doing collages. And then that then became a series of prints and drawings. So these are 4 of them. So the top left then was sort of like a pastel Conte drawing. It's kind of looking down at a plan view of Navan Fort. And then equally on the one on the right is done in pencil. And they were the basis for 2 prints that I did. So the bottom left was a lithograph. In fact, it was one of the first lithographs I'd ever done. In fact, it is the first lithograph I actually did when I come to think about it. Oh, certainly from stone. And then the print on the bottom right was a large etching. But I also then did a whole series of drawings, collecting sort of objects. This is, again, when living in Ireland, and bringing disparate kind of objects together. So this is like walking along beaches on the east coast of Northern Ireland and collecting, and most beaches at that time were full of junk and bits of plastic and all sorts of items. There was a firing range that the army had across the way, so there was all sorts of slightly dodgy bomb-looking like materials as well, which I found quite interesting to draw. So then this is a whole series of drawings from that period as well, and then they introduce a bit of the landscape as well, because that area of East Down is really quite a beautiful spot. And a bit sort of closer in time, this is a series of drawings I did in Aberystwyth. And again, this is sort of based on the landscape of Tannabuch, which is, I think, the south beach of Aberystwyth. And again, this is kind of collecting materials and using those materials to develop compositions. These are gouache and pencil mostly. Oh, I don't know why it keeps jumping. Again, this is yet another series from that time. They're about 12 inches square, or 300 millimeters square, or a bit bigger maybe. That sort of kind of size. And this particular project, this was a project I was invited to do by Swansea Print Workshop to commemorate the work of Dylan Thomas. Obviously, you've probably come across Dylan Thomas and his writings. And one of the things about that project was that I was very interested in going down to the Dylan Thomas Centre in Swansea and finding... So this again was looking at the idea of thesaurus, and then doing this in sort of visual terms and looking at sort of how that could be identified in that way. This became a series of etchings. And a similar project, this was an illustration project for Emir Humphreys, and this was to celebrate 100 years of his writing. Well, I say 100 years of writing, but it was really kind of covering 100 years, although he was actually in his 90s. And this was using Tanner Book Beach again, and introducing elements of his stories, which kind of are about Welsh life through the 20th century, and it's using the same landscape but changing the story in front of it, and that became a series of little lithographs. As you can see, I'm using the same headland in the background but changing the images. I'm also very interested in walls and graffiti and sort of looking at writing and textures, so that's been feeding in a bit. And there's some series of drawings. Some of these are from Sydney and in Melbourne. And then this developed into a series of lithographs called water walls. Oh, I don't know what that's doing there. Like that. Bit concerned about time here, so I've got to whisk this up, or whisk this along here. So this year, after having sort of been doing Teams and Skype, oh, for God's sake, sorry, what's happening there?
Sorry, we seem to be having.
I think the Zoom is still live. It's just the screen.
Hi,
sharing.
sorry, something's gone wrong. So let's just.
There we go.
There we
Oh,
go.
okay.
I might skip you.
Okay. Okay, so because of Zoom and things like that, one of the things I really felt I had to do this year was to draw. I just needed to physically make drawings. So I started off, I hadn't really got any idea of what it is I wanted to draw. So I went back to this idea of collecting and doing still lives. So really what you see on screen there are a series of different still lives that I've been doing since January. And they're all constructed in boxes. And then these are some of the drawings. And these are, why does that keep going back? So that's then a series of, they're basically just pencil drawings that they start off with. This mouse isn't working at all.
There you go.
Okay.
Sorry, the mouse was upside down.
Oh, the mouse is upside down. There you go. And some color ones as well. So I've done about 20 of these. And then I've become interested in deconstructing these still lives into elements. And the idea is then these elements then will be put together as a series of prints. And that's really, again, what I'm using this project for, because I'm starting to make plates that are deconstructing the images I've been making. So the series at the top, yes, I see that, yeah. I see at the top here, then there's a series of collages that I've been making as well, and then a series of plates that are going to be introduced into some of the lithographs. And then these then have been developed digitally, and then they're also going to be developed through lithographs as well. So these are some of the proofs that I've been working on. And there they are there. So that's where I'm at the minute, and what I've been doing here this last couple of days is really developing some deconstructed.
Thank you.